Hello everyone. Like that? Am I audible? Is the voice clear? Shriyansh. Good morning everyone. Please confirm whether the audio is clear. Good morning. Is the voice clear? All right. Fine. Today we are going to start a discussion on the next topic, and that is economic survey, chapter number 2. As you all know that we have been covering economic survey chapters, and we have already covered the chapter on inflation. We already covered the chapter on revenue relish, that was of the fiscal policy. And today we are going to cover a very important chapter, more important for your mains perspective. You can clearly see that in this chapter they have come up with some very important issues that are more important for your mains perspective, and we'll be covering that as well. अब इसमें before we start, I'll tell you how you can get this chapter. So what you have to do first is you have to go to Google. वहां पर आप इकोनॉमिक सर्वे सर्च कर सकते हैं. इकोनॉमिक सर्वे. So you'll get this indiabudget.gov.in, and this is your economic survey here, chapter wise. So we already covered this chapter, fiscal developments. We covered the prices and inflation. Today we are going to cover India's medium term growth outlook with optimism and hope. So इस पे आप click करेंगे, you will get the chapter. So this is the chapter that we are going to cover today. So you please download this chapter. इसको सीधा download करिए, and we will be reading through the chapter. आपको हम बताएंगे कि how do you read this chapter. वो भी कनेक्ट करना है. All right, have you downloaded this chapter? I'll just be showing you कि कहाँ से आपको पढ़ना है. इसमें बहुत अच्छा चैप्टर है, बहुत अच्छी इनपुट्स दिए हैं इन्होंने इसमें. It will help us in understanding the India's economic history. Just give me a second. Okay. All right. चलिए. Now you have the chapter in front of you. It is about India's medium term growth outlook with optimism and hope. India's medium term growth outlook with optimism and hope. Now let's focus on the title first. Now, why do you think they have mentioned this word optimism and hope? Economic survey में आपका chapter starts with optimism and hope. India's medium term. If you remember when we covered the planning in India, वहाँ पर I covered that how planning is done in short term on an annual basis. We call it operational plan. Then how planning is done for the medium term, we call it a tactical plan. And how planning is done for the long term, we call it a perspective or strategic plan. तो medium term का आपका क्या outlook है? What is the outlook in the medium tactical term, जहां पर आप 4-5 साल की बात करते हैं. India's medium term growth outlook with optimism and hope. यानी what next in the next 3 to 4 years India क्या hope कर रहा है, India क्या सोच रहा है. Now see, this optimism and hope, they have mentioned this word hope because India में जो right now what we are witnessing in India, that is after the big supply shock of the COVID, आप कोविड की वजह से जो पहले सप्लाई डिसरप्शन हुआ, then after that we also saw COVID pandemic के बाद the commodity super cycle because of the Russia-Ukraine crisis. Commodity prices went up the roof. Because of all these crises, we are hoping that once the crisis goes away, India will have a very high growth rate. And in the conclusion of the chapter, last page, they have mentioned that we are trying to optimistically expect that India would have a 6.5% of a growth rate in the medium term. So point ये है that right now India is under a lot of pressure, is under a lot of stress because of these crises. But हमारी hope है that once the crisis is done away with, once the crisis goes away, then we would see a very high growth rate. अब आप अगर पीछे से जाएंगे, you go directly to the last page. Last page पे जाइए आप, and last page पे I will read the fourth line from the bottom. That is why we are optimistic. I am directly connecting the beginning of the chapter to the end conclusion of the chapter. We are optimistic that India will achieve an average 6.5% of real GDP growth in the medium term. In addition, if other reforms explained in the previous paragraph are pursued in the coming years, India's potential GDP growth can rise to 7 to 8% per annum in the medium term. So India is hoping that we would have 6.5% of real GDP growth. My question to all of you is, title though we have understood that India is hoping to have a higher growth rate, 6.5%. Now question is, what is real GDP growth? Real GDP growth is which is adjusted to inflation. We have two GDP, nominal as well as real. So nominal is not adjusted to inflation. और nominal GDP कैसे निकालते हैं? With regards to current prices, and real GDP is with regard to base year constant prices. तो हम constant prices यानी real GDP को 6.5% पे बढ़ाने की बात कर रहे हैं on an average. Now what I want to do is, I want you, all of you, to study the first paragraph. आप अच्छे से पहला पैराग्राफ पढ़िए, because इसी में we will have a lot of discussion on this paragraph. You study the first paragraph. It will give you some very important inputs about Indian economy. पढ़ लिया? Now, अब देखिए इसमें बहुत सारे concepts they have added into this paragraph. Now, first of all, tell me why have they chosen, पहले word से, why have they chosen these 8 years from 2014 to 22? Because there have been a change in the power at the center. So there is a change in the approach, how India was after, under the previous regime, and now under the new regime, India ने क्या changes करी है. And because of a new approach at the center, we are witnessing that in the last 8 years, from 2014 to 22, India has had a lot of changes. India has had a lot of reforms. Now see, क्या लिखा है? 2014 to 22 is an important period in the economic history of India. The economy underwent a gamut of wide-ranging structural and governance reforms. That means economy in the last 8 years have gone through a lot of reforms. अब ये reform जो हमने करा है, let me zoom in so that you can clearly see. ये जो reform हमने करा है, economic survey, what were the reforms of 1991? What do we call it? LPG reforms. And the reforms in the last 8 years, economic survey has called it the new age reforms. The new age reforms. इसको न्यू एज रिफॉर्म बोला गया है. ओके, सो वाइड रेंजिंग स्ट्रक्चरल एंड गवर्नेंस रिफॉर्म्स दैट स्ट्रेंथेंड द इकोनॉमीज फंडामेंटल्स बाय एनहांसिंग इट्स ओवरऑल एफिशिएंसी. तो इकोनॉमी एफिशिएंट हो गया बिकॉज ऑफ दीज रिफॉर्म्स, with an underlying emphasis on improving the ease of living and doing business. Ease of living as well as ease of doing business. The reforms were based on the broad principles. अब reforms में क्या क्या principle थे? There are basically 4 principles. कौन कौन सा? Creating public goods, adopting trust-based governance, and a private sector should trust the governance system, co-partnering with private sector for development, improving agricultural productivity. अब इसको इधर ही हम रखेंगे and you will turn the page to page number 28. Go to page number 28. Page number 28 में you will get this reforms for new India. दिख रहा है? सबका साथ, सबका विकास. दिस इज योर न्यू एज रिफॉर्म. इसमें जस्ट लुक एट द पैराग्राफ, लुक एट द डायग्राम एट द बॉटम. क्या लिखा है? अंडरलाइंग फ्रेमवर्क फॉर रिफॉर्म्स फॉर अ न्यू इंडिया, एनहांसिंग प्रोडक्टिव पोटेंशियल ऑफ द इकोनॉमी एंड इट्स पीपल, एफिशिएंट रिसोर्स एलोकेशन. कैसे करना है? ईज ऑफ डूइंग एंड ईज ऑफ लिविंग. और उसके लिए यू हैव 4 बेसिक प्रिंसिपल्स: क्रिएटिंग पब्लिक गुड्स, trust-based governance, agricultural productivity, private sector participation. ये 4 पिलर है आपके न्यू एज रिफॉर्म्स के. बेसिकली दीज आर द 4 रिफॉर्म्स जो हमने 1991 में, यू जस्ट रिमेंबर लिबरलाइजेशन, प्राइवेटाइजेशन, ग्लोबलाइजेशन. इन द सेम वे, इन द लास्ट 8 years, if you have to remember the reforms, you'll have to remember these 4 things: creation of public goods, trust-based governance, agri productivity, and private sector participation. समझ आ रहा है? Now इसके अंदर we have done a lot of things. We have done a lot of things. But before we study that one by one, tell me what are public goods. अगर हम पहले रिफॉर्म की बात करेंगे, क्रिएशन ऑफ पब्लिक गुड्स, what are public goods? शाबाश. Is there an economic definition for that? Yes, बोलो बोलो. What are public goods? ठीक है, but what is the definition? See, public goods ऐसे goods होते हैं, we call them, they are non-arrival, non-excludable goods. तो public goods क्या होते हैं? This is the public good. Go to page number 29. Go to page number 29. What is the first reform? Creation of public goods. तो public good क्या है? Public goods are non-rival and non-excludable. You can watch it on the board. Non-rival and non-excludable. What is a rival good? Rival good ऐसा गुड होता है कि एक के इस्तेमाल करने से दूसरे पे फर्क पड़ेगा. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, इफ आई परचेज अ पिज्जा और ये पिज्जा मेरे टेबल पे है एंड आई एम कंज्यूमिंग द पिज्जा, my consumption of this pizza, is it hampering your consumption of the same pizza? मैंने पिज्जा खरीदा, ये पिज्जा मेरे सामने, मैंने इसका स्लाइस उठा के, इसमें there are 6 slices, I took one of the slices and I consumed it. My consumption of the pizza, is it hampering your consumption of this pizza? है ना? Yes, because I already had one slice, maybe I had 4 slices, आपके लिए नहीं बचा ज्यादा. So my consumption is hampering your consumption. So we call it a rival good. इसको हम क्या बोलते हैं? A rival good. कि एक के इस्तेमाल करने से one person's use of it hampers other person's use of it. ठीक है? So that is a rival good. But public good cannot be a rival good. Public good rival नहीं हो सकता. For example, you have a highway. क्या आपकी हाईवे पे गाड़ी चलाने से क्या मेरी गाड़ी चलाने पे कोई फर्क पड़ेगा? मैं गाड़ी चला रहा हूँ, आप भी गाड़ी चला रहे हैं, आपको भी फ्री में मिल रहा है, मुझे भी फ्री में मिल रहा है. ये सड़क गवर्नमेंट ने बनाई है, तो आप भी चलाइए, मैं भी चलाऊंगा. इट्स अ पब्लिक गुड. सो इफ यू आर ड्राइविंग अ कार ऑन द हाईवे और उसके पीछे मैं अपनी गाड़ी चला रहा हूँ, सो इट्स नॉट हैम्परिंग माई कंजम्पशन. आप भी चला सकते हैं, मैं भी चला सकता हूँ. इट्स अ पब्लिक गुड. पब्लिक गुड नॉन ड्राइवल होते हैं. समझा? इसमें वन पर्सन यूज डू नॉट हैम्पर द अदर पर्सन यूज ऑफ इट. Second concept is excludable good. Excludable good क्या हो गया? That you can exclude a certain section from its consumption. For example, right now I am providing you a private service. ये private commodity मैं आपको दे रहा हूँ. I am teaching you economic survey. तो it's a private service जो मैं decide करूँगा कि मुझे किसको देना है. And suppose I decide that I do not teach people who are less than 20 years of age. तो जो भी 20 साल से कम के बच्चे हैं, I am excluding those students from the consumption of my service. I can exclude them. मेरी मर्जी. आपका you are the owner of the service. तो आप खुद decide करिए. For example, Republic Bharat has decided that we are not going to transmit our services to Kashmir. हमें नहीं ट्रांसमिशन करना कश्मीर में, तो वो एक्सक्लूड कर सकते हैं कश्मीर को. उन्हें किया भी कश्मीर को एक्सक्लूड. ठीक है? और उल्टा गवर्नमेंट ने बैन किया था उनको. तो आइडिया इज प्राइवेट सर्विस और प्राइवेट गुड कैन बी एक्सक्लूडेबल. आप किसी को भी एक्सक्लूड कर सकते हो. डोमिनोज कैन कम अप विद अ पॉलिसी दैट ऑन संडेज वी विल ओनली बी गिविंग पिज्जाज टू गर्ल्स, वी आर एक्सक्लूडिंग बॉयज. तो कर सकते हैं वो, इट्स अ प्राइवेट गुड. पर पब्लिक गुड कैनॉट बी एक्सक्लूडेबल. Government cannot tell you that since you have not paid the taxes, you cannot walk on this road. Government cannot tell you since you have not paid the income tax, you will not be given the defense services of India. आपको सिक्योरिटी नहीं देंगे, आपको लॉ एंड ऑर्डर नहीं देंगे. ठीक है ना? आपको एक्सक्लूड नहीं किया जा सकता है. सो पब्लिक गुड्स आर नॉन राइवल एंड नॉन एक्सक्लूडेबल. वन पर्सन's यूज cannot hamper other person's use of it, and nobody can be excluded from the usage of a public good. समझ आ रहा है? Because of that, it creates a free rider problem. Free rider problem क्या हो गया? Because how does the government provide a public good? By investing money. And where does the money come from? By taxes. ठीक है? For example, you all paid the taxes and government collected taxes from you and used that money for the construction of the road. तो आपने तो टैक्स भरा and we have constructed the road after that. But there is me, I did not pay any tax. मैं फिर भी रोड पे चल रहा हूं, तो I am a free rider. मैं मुफ्त में चल रहा हूं. I have not paid any taxes, I am a free rider. तो पब्लिक गुड्स में there are free riders, उसमें कोई दिक्कत नहीं. समझ आ रहा है? So what is the first reform? The first reform is the creation of public goods. Now see, यहां पर you can look at this topic. आप इस टॉपिक को अच्छे से पढ़ो, पब्लिक गुड्स वाले पे. Just read these lines, these few lines. So the launch of Golden Quadrilateral project in 2000s was the beginning of infrastructure intensive policy making in India, which continued sedately for another decade. A quantum leap in policy commitment and outlay for infrastructure is now visible, and काफी ज़्यादा commitment है government की so that we can increase the infrastructure. It is now visible in the last few years. In the last few years, look at the graph. Graph देखो last few years में. Look at from 2019, then 20, then 21, then 22, then 23. You can see that capital expenditure is on the rise. Capital expenditure is on the rise. So union's capital expenditure as part of GDP is on the rise. Clear है? Now क्या लिखा है? Visible in the last few years, cushioning economic growth when the non-financial corporate sector was unable to invest due to balance sheet troubles. In doing so, government has laid a good platform for crowding in private investments and growth in the coming decade. मुझे बताइए, the government is telling you that we have created public goods. Why have we created public goods? Because private sector is under balance sheet crisis. Private sector में you have a balance sheet trouble, and private sector का नुकसान हो रहा है. There are problems of NPAs, जहाँ पर your banks, your companies, you have a twin balance sheet problem, wherein the companies are registering losses, and because of the companies registering losses, the banks are registering losses. इसको हम twin balance sheet syndrome कहते हैं. And because of all that, the private sector is not much interested in investing in infrastructure. That is why government comes in, and government puts heavy focus on infrastructure creation. इसी को हम कहते हैं that government has laid a good platform, because I've already told you that when you invest in capital expenditure, it does not crowd out private investment, it crowds in private investment. Because if the government is borrowing for revenue expenditure, that will crowd out private investment. But if the government is borrowing from the market and is investing in infrastructure, creating this infrastructure, creating employment opportunities, creating production capacity of India, it will increase private investment in the economy. So इसमें crowding in effect हो जाएगा. Now from this point, I want you to attempt this question. आप एक क्वेश्चन करिए. इधर पे ही हम एक प्रीलिम्स का क्वेश्चन बना सकते हैं. Consider the following statements regarding public goods. Consider the following statements regarding public goods. Regarding public goods. Number one, public goods. Public goods are those goods that are non-excludable and non-rival. Non-excludable and non-rival. Capex, capital expenditure will lead to creation of public goods. Creation of public goods. What is the answer? Online students, what is the answer to the question? Public goods are those goods that are non-excludable and non-rival. Capex will lead to the creation of public goods. So the answer is तो पहला स्टेटमेंट, सेकंड स्टेटमेंट, बोथ ऑफ द स्टेटमेंट्स आर करेक्ट. चलो ये यहां पर वी हैव क्रिएटेड अ क्वेश्चन. उसके बाद कुछ एग्जांपल्स दिए इकोनॉमिक सर्वे ने, दैट हमने किस तरीके का इसमें इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर क्रिएट करा है. डेडिकेटेड प्रोग्राम्स ऑफ रोड कनेक्टिविटी के लिए वी हैड भारतमाला. पोर्ट इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर के लिए सागरमाला. इलेक्ट्रिफिकेशन, रेलवे अपग्रेडेशन, ऑपरेशनलाइजेशन ऑफ न्यू एयरपोर्ट्स, उड़ान, है ना, हैव सिग्निफिकेंटली इंप्रूव्ड फिजिकल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर. उसके बाद वी हैव नेशनल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर पाइपलाइन. यू रिमेंबर दैट 111 crore फॉर इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर डेवलपमेंट. नेशनल मोनेटाइजेशन पाइपलाइन 2021, monetizing the assets of the government. You know, it's different from privatization. मैंने आपको कहा privatization में you sell off the asset, but यहाँ पर you monetize it for some time to take the money, create another asset, monetize it again and take back after the lease period is over. Then you have this national monetization pipeline. उसके बाद there is some, ये project है कुछ 35 subsectors. It is not important for your exam. इसको आप skip कर सकते हो. You just need to remember these: Bharatmala, Sagarmala, electrification program, railway upgradation, Udan, physical infrastructure, national infrastructure pipeline, national monetization pipeline, more than enough. Clear है? Okay. अब यहां पर look at this graph. Look at this graph. Developments in critical infrastructure capacity. Electricity installed capacity, the 100 wala jo hai, the 100 wala has been taken a base for 2011, then you have another for 2014, then you have another for 2020. So it's indirectly trying to tell you from 2011 how much infrastructure has increased till 2020. So agar aapka electricity installed capacity has an index of 100, it has increased to 215 in how many years? In just 9 years, from 11 to 20. Likewise, cargo handling capacity of ports 100 से 180 हो गया है. रेलवे ट्रैक्स 100 से 114, नेशनल हाईवेज 100 से 187. तो क्रिटिकल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर इंडिया का बढ़ रहा है. Is it clear? These are some of the public goods that the government has created for infrastructure development and all that. But government has also, economic survey mentions that not only these infrastructural public goods that we have created, we have also created digital public goods. Digital public goods. You go to page number 30, last paragraph, 2.13. 2.13. Just read the project, read this entire paragraph. पूरा पैराग्राफ पढ़िए. Read the entire paragraph. श्रेयांश, रंजन, कावरी, Avinav, just complete the paragraph 2.13. All these have been created as the digital public goods. तो ये गवर्नमेंट ने क्या क्या क्रिएट करा? फॉर एग्जाम्पल डिजिटल आइडेंटिटी के लिए वी हैव आधार लिंकिंग बैंक अकाउंट्स, पीएम जनधन योजना, penetration of mobile phones. In other words, we call it jam trinity, Jandan, Aadhaar, mobile, jam trinity. The country has witnessed significant progress in financial inclusion because of this jam trinity. The population covered with banks accounts 53%, not important for us. International evidence shows that the countries at the same level of development have almost taken half a century to achieve the extent of India's massive expansion and access to bank accounts. यानी हमारी लेवल की डेवलपमेंट जितना बाकी कंट्रीज में थी, कंपेयर टू अस वी हैव डन वेरी हाई मैसिव एक्सपेंशन इन द in financial inclusion in providing bank accounts to the public. Numerous digital public goods such as digital verification, digital signature, digital repositories, DigiLocker, UPI system have supported financial inclusion, greater financial inclusion and access to credit incentives, higher consumption and investment leading to higher economic growth. Some of the recently introduced digital initiatives are Open Network for Digital Commerce, Account Aggregator. This is just for sharing of financial information. Account Aggregator framework will open up further avenues for e-commerce market access and credit availability and strengthen the expected economic growth in the medium term. Okay, so herein only you can have another question. यहीं पर एक और क्वेश्चन बन सकता है आपको प्रीलिम्स में. Write down. Question is, in the context of Indian economy, which of the following are considered in the context of Indian economy, which of the following are considered digital public goods? Are considered digital public goods. Number 1, digital signature. Digital signature. Number 2, Open Network for Digital Commerce. ONDC, Open Network for Digital Commerce. DigiLocker, UPI. Options 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 1 and 3, 1, 3 and 4 either. 1, 3 and 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Huh? हो गया? ऑनलाइन स्टूडेंट्स, व्हाट इज द आंसर? तो इस तरीके से वी कैन कवर द डिजिटल पब्लिक गुड्स. अब एक और क्वेश्चन, ये तो अभी आसान आपको लग रहा है बिकॉज यू ऑलरेडी स्टडीड इट. अब मैं एक क्वेश्चन पहले ही दे दूंगा सो दैट लेट्स सी whether or not you'll be able to do it. Then we will study it. Write down one more question. Which of the following reforms were undertaken? Which of the following reforms were undertaken as part of 1991 economic reforms? As part of 1991 economic reforms. As part of 1991 economic reforms. Number 1, transition towards market determined exchange rates. transition towards market determined exchange rates, removal of import licensing, a removal of import licensing. Number 3, ending of public sector monopoly in all sectors, ending of public sector monopoly in all sectors, fully convertible capital account. Fully convertible capital account. Options 1 and 4, 2 and 3, 1 and 2, 3 and 4. चलो पहले पढ़ते हैं. So this was your first reform, creation of public goods. Creation of public goods. उसके बाद you turn the page to the second reform. Second reform क्या आपका? Trust based governance. Trust based governance में what have we done? We have created insolvency and bankruptcy code. Insolvency and bankruptcy code. What is insolvency and bankruptcy code? शाबाश. When was it introduced in India? 2016. Asset IBC में what is the difference between insolvency and bankruptcy? Insolvency क्या होता है और bankruptcy क्या होता है? शाबाश. How is insolvency different from bankruptcy? Now let me tell you, insolvency simply means that you are not able to pay back. ठीक है, you have become insolvent. You are not able to pay back the interest amount. You are not able to pay back the principal. Second हो गया bankruptcy. Bankruptcy is a legal status. Legal status that you have become insolvent. उसके लिए आपको bankruptcy फाइल करनी पड़ती है. So that you will get a legal status that the company has now become bankrupt. Bankruptcy is a legal status. ठीक है ना, जिसके लिए फाइल करना पड़ता है. चलिए, तो सेकेंड वन इज ट्रस्ट बेस्ड गवर्नेंस. तो गवर्नेंस को इंप्रूव करने के लिए इनिशियली यू हैड दिस सरफासे, और सरफासे के बाद वी क्रिएटेड आईबीसी. आईबीसी के बाद वी क्रिएटेड रियल एस्टेट रेगुलेशन एंड डेवलपमेंट एक्ट, रीरा कहते हैं इसको, which has enhanced ease of doing business. You remember, ease of living business, ease of living as well as ease of doing business. ये करना है हमें. IBC has imbibed some of the best international practices of an asset resolution mechanism. हो गया आपका एक. उसके बाद रीरा, रियल एस्टेट 2.17, Real Estate Regulation and Development Act RERA is creating a culture of transparent transactions in the real estate sector. So transparency in the real estate sector के लिए we have created RERA. उसके नीचे जाइए. We have also had the Companies Act of 2013. So Companies Act of 2013 has decriminalized minor economic offences. Minor economic offences को decriminalize कर दिया. So this is again a step towards economic ease of living as well as ease of doing business. उसके बाद you can turn the page. How government has created a trust-based governance system. You can see that government has removed retrospective taxation. So retrospective taxation क्या था? Government would change the laws and would say that ये अब नया जो टैक्स है it would be imposed in retrospect. तो वो हमने बंद कर दिया, तो इससे भी एक ट्रस्ट डेवलप हो गया. Then go to para number 2.2. 2.2 में government came up with unified GST, है ना, in 2017. Government reduced the corporate tax rate. ये भी हमने पढ़ा, corporate tax rate was reduced. ठीक है, 22%. ठीक है, we have got it down to 22%. 15% was for new Indian manufacturing companies. We have exemption in sovereign wealth fund, exemption in pension funds from taxes, removing dividend distribution tax. ये भी abolish किया ना हमने, ये abolished it. We reduce the tax burden on individuals. इससे भी trust develop होता है. उसके बाद go down to page number 2.21. 2.21. पहले क्वेश्चन एक लिखो, then we'll come to this paragraph. We'll come back to this question afterwards. Write down a question. Consider the following statements. Consider the following statements. Number one, in last 5 years, Indian economy has been marked Indian economy has been marked by decreasing tax buoyancy. By decreasing tax buoyancy. Number two, India's gross FDI increased on an average of 10% during last 7 years. Options. One only, two only, both, none. India's gross FDI increased on an average of 10% during the last 7 years. चलो पढ़ो ये. Read the paragraph 2.21 and then answer the question. What is despite tax rationalization? What do I mean by that? Tax rationalization क्या होता है? टैक्सेस को कम करना, ठीक है. Despite tax rationalization, there has been a positive trend of higher tax buoyancy is visible. तो आपको क्वेश्चन में क्या था? Decreasing tax buoyancy. So in the question we had in front of you, in the last 5 years, Indian economy has been marked by decreasing tax buoyancy, but we know that tax buoyancy कम नहीं हुआ है, बढ़ गया है. तो फर्स्ट स्टेटमेंट इज इनकरेक्ट. ठीक है, लेट्स गो बैक. अच्छा, यहां पर वी ऑल्सो हैव दिस कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ रैशनलाइजेशन ऑफ टैक्सेस में लैफर कर्व. बताइए व्हाट इज अ लैफर कर्व?
तो हमें ऐसा लगे कि टैक्स इंक्रीज होंगे, लेकिन एक टाइम के बाद वो डिक्रीज होने लगे. मीन्स अगर 70% टैक्स ऊपर दिया है, प्योरिटी कर दिया, तो फिर लोग प्रोडक्शन करना बंद कर देते.
So how does the curve look like? कर्व की शेप क्या है? Inverted U curve. So Laffer curve is your tax rate and tax revenue. तो इसके बीच में you have an inverted U curve. ठीक है? And initially when you increase the taxes, you also increase the revenue. But after a certain point, when you increase the tax rate, you reduce the revenue. And this point here is your optimum tax rate. Optimum tax rate. Inverted U curve. चलिए वापस. तो एक चीज तो पता चल गया यहाँ पर, tax buoyancy has been high. So you are easily able to do the first part. The first part of the statement is wrong. Second statement, FDI. You'll get this answer in the third reform. तीसरा reform कौन सा है? Promoting the private sector as a co-partner in the development. Promoting the private sector as a co-partner in the development. तो हमने private sector को as a co-partner बनाना है in the development. Read the last paragraph here. Production incentives under Atmanirbhar Bharat also incentivize foreign investments for domestic production. This is the last paragraph of page number 32. The last 8 years have seen further liberalization of the policy towards foreign investors, with most sectors now open for 100% FDI under automatic route. This has resulted in a visible structural shift in the gross FDI flows to India during the last decade. During the last decade. Shift in the gross FDI flows to India during the last decade. बताइए what is the second statement? आगे बढ़ो. India's gross FDI has increased from an average of 2.2% to 2.6% in financial year 15 to 22. The highest ever annual gross FDI inflow has been $84 billion was recorded in FY22. These trends are an endorsement of India's status as preferred investment destination amongst global investors. ठीक है? So इसमें second, first is not correct, second is not correct because इसमें average is only 2.6%. ठीक है? हो गया तीसरा. चौथा क्या है आपका? reform, enhancing productivity in agriculture. Enhancing productivity in agriculture. And agricultural productivity. The agricultural sector has grown at an average annual growth rate of 4.6% during the last 6 years. ये क्वेश्चन आपको आ सकता है. During the last 6 years, how many, what is the percentage of agricultural growth rate? उसमें हमने क्या क्या किया है? We have done soil health card, micro irrigation fund, organic farming, natural farming. We have promoted farmer producer organization, ENAM. ENAM is in National Agricultural Market Connecting APMC mandis. उसके बाद we have agricultural infrastructure fund, we have cluster development program. ये सारे program you can mention in your answer. So this is by increasing, enhancing agri productivity. Clear है? हाँ जी.
फर्स्ट पॉइंट है जो लास्ट 5 ईयर में हमारे जो टैक्स बैंक से वो इंक्रीज हुई, उसके पीछे का मेन रीजन क्या है सर? जीएसटी.
टैक्स रैशनलाइजेशन, इंक्रीजिंग द टैक्स बेस, वो उसमें लिखा है, मैं बताता हूँ कहाँ पे. टैक्स बॉयंसी, गो टू पेज नंबर 33. देखिए, a positive GST, despite tax rationalization, a positive trend of higher tax buoyancy is visible in the economy. The notable economist Indra Rajaraman termed GST a revenue success in 2019. Thereafter, a positive GST revenue collection trends have strengthened further despite the pandemic. Average monthly gross GST collection इतना था, फिर इतना हो गया, from 0.9 to 1.49. Evidence suggests that buoyancy of the indirect tax replaced by GST has improved post GST regime. उसके बाद other taxes such as corporate tax, which is the direct tax, were followed by the pandemic-led uncertainty and disruption. Their impact on collections is gradually becoming visible in higher tax collections. Corporate tax collections for April increased to 21% from 10%. ठीक है? तो corporate tax भी बढ़ा है, GST भी बढ़ा है. Overall, let's go to the first page. वापस से e-way bills are under your GST regime, जहां पर आपका इंटरस्टेट जब कॉमर्स होगा तो उनमें इलेक्ट्रॉनिकली बिल जनरेट होता है. दिस इज अ स्टेप टुवर्ड्स ट्रस्ट बेस्ड गवर्नेंस, जहां पर आप ई गवर्नेंस को बढ़ावा दे रहे हो. नाउ वी वर स्टडीइंग द फर्स्ट पैराग्राफ. गो टू द फर्स्ट पैराग्राफ अगेन. तो हमने क्या पढ़ा? 2014 to 22 is an important period in the economic history of India. The economy underwent a gamut of wide-ranging structural and governance reforms that strengthened the economy's fundamentals by enhancing its overall efficiency. With an underlying emphasis on improving the ease of living and doing business, the reforms were based on the principles of creating public goods, covered that, trust-based governance, co-partnering with private sector, improving agri productivity under normal circumstances. Now देखो, कहा जाता है because of these reforms, these have been carried out in the last 8 years, 2014 to 22, according to economics. And अगर normal circumstances होते and we were carrying out such reforms under normal circumstances, India would have a very high growth. But this is not a normal circumstance right now, because India has basically two big problems. One was the pandemic-led problem, and the other was the commodity problem that was created after Russia-Ukraine crisis. Commodity super cycle, inflation जब आया, ठीक है? तो these two problems create abnormalities in the economy, and because of these setbacks, India has not achieved the potential जो इंडिया का था. And we are believing, and we are hoping, and we are optimistic that once these big supply shocks, once these crises are mitigated and are actually gone, then India would reach a very high growth level. यही इन्होंने लिखा है. Under normal circumstances, reforms of such scale and relevance would have accelerated economic growth. However, largely due to the balance sheet stress caused by credit boom in the previous years, and balance sheet में stress है, companies are under losses, banks are under losses. Secondarily, due to the one-off global shocks that followed, key macroeconomic variables such as credit growth, capital formation, and hence economic growth are adversely impacted during this period. Further, some reforms deliver results in lagged effect as their diffusion in the economy takes place. ये बहुत important point है, lagged effect. Now, what do they mean by lagged effect here? क्या समझ आ रहा है? Because once the reforms are done, उसका impact immediately नहीं लगता है. It has a lagged effect. कुछ टाइम के बाद मिलता है उसका exact what is the impact of these reforms. They are shown after a certain amount of time. Now I'll show you. They have said that इंडिया में जो हमने reforms कराए from 2014 to 22, whatever new age reforms we have undergone, it has a lagged effect. It will come up with this benefit, but after a lag. In the same way as in 1998-2002, India had some problem. तो उसमें हमने काफी सारे reforms करे in 1991. 1991 में we went for LPG reforms. 1991 के बाद we went for second generation reforms that were supplementary and complementary to the first generation reforms to help the LPG reforms, further liberalization, further privatization, further globalization. But after all these reforms, they did not immediately reap the benefit, because 1998 में और 2002 तक we had some shocks, we had some problems in the economy. Then after 2002, we saw the lagged effect. After 2002, we saw the bearing of the fruits of the reforms that we had done. तो जैसे कि 1998-2002 तक crisis चल रहा था, and after 2002 we were able to bear the fruits. In the same way, इंडिया में भी इस वक्त, दुनिया में भी इस वक्त 2020 से 2023 तक we have had a crisis of Ukraine, we have had a crisis of pandemic. और जब ये खत्म होगा, then only we will be able to reap the benefit. So what they have done, and this could be a potential question for your mains. Why has Economic Survey compared these two periods of the present time with the period of 1998 and 2002? इन दोनों को उन्होंने कंपेयर करा है, और दे हैव सेड दैट जैसे 1991 में रिफॉर्म्स किए थे, इट डिड नॉट रीप द बेनिफिट, उसको 10 साल लगे आने. इन द सेम वे अभी भी हमने रिफॉर्म किए पिछले 8 साल में, and it's not immediately showing us the benefit, it will show the benefit. And you go to page number 38, उसमें हमें ये क्लियर होगा. Go to page number 38. Page number 38. The period 2014-22 is analogous to the period of 98-2002. ठीक है? Analogous. Now, why are they analogous? Let's look at the table. What were the shocks to the economy? आपने 1998 और 2014 में shocks क्या क्या देखे हमने? In 1998-2002 we had shocks like nuclear device हमने टेस्ट किया था 1998 में, इंडिया पे sanctions पड़े थे, ठीक है. We had banking and corporate sector deleveraging and repairing the balance sheets. हमारा banking and corporate sector had a twin balance sheet problem. उसके बाद we had 2 successful droughts, बहुत खतरनाक ड्रॉट इंडिया में था. टेक्नोलॉजी बस्ट हो गया, we call it the dot-com bubble. The dot-com bubble. The dot-com bubble. Technology bust. Dot-com bubble burst हो गया 2002 में. You know, these internet companies, dot-com companies, they were heavily getting invested in US, और US में ये क्राइसिस हुआ 2002 में, जहां पर इंटरनेट कंपनीज लॉस्ट वैल्यूएशन. देयर वाज अ कंपनी दैट हैड अ वैल्यूएशन ऑफ क्लोज टू $600 million, and within 1 year its valuation went to 0. The Amazon का शेयर was being sold at $100, it went down to $9. इतना कम हो गया Amazon का शेयर. Then it went up to $600. तो काफी ज्यादा कंपनीज का नुकसान हुआ, इंटरनेट कंपनीज का. सो वी कॉल इट टेक्नोलॉजी बस्ट. उसके बाद यूएस रिसेशन में चला गया इन 2002, एंड इट वाज द सेम टाइम व्हेन वी हैड 9/11 अटैक्स ऑन वर्ल्ड ट्रेड सेंटर. तो WTC पे आपका 9/11 अटैक हुआ. This exacerbated the .com bubble, 9/11 अटैक अमेरिका के अंदर. So these were some of the shocks to the economy in 1998. अब इस वक्त क्या क्या शॉक है? बैंकिंग, नॉन बैंकिंग, नॉन फाइनेंशियल कॉर्पोरेट सेक्टर बैलेंस शीट स्ट्रेस है. वही चीज फिर से अनप्रेसिडेंटेड पैंडेमिक शॉक, unprecedented pandemic shock followed by inflation and global commodity price shock followed by tightening of financial conditions. ठीक है, these are the right now these are the shocks to the economy. जैसे 1998 में शॉक था वैसे ही इस वक्त भी शॉक. Then reforms क्या क्या हुए थे? What were the reforms? Interest rate deregulation, privatization, LPG, asset recovery for banks, सरफासे. ठीक है, सरफासे came in which year? 2002. सरफासे. इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर गोल्डन क्वाड्रिलेटरल, वो भी 2000s में है, कनेक्टिंग द मेट्रोपॉलिटन सिटीज. FRBM एक्ट 2003, फिस्कल रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी बजट मैनेजमेंट एक्ट. ये सारे रिफॉर्म्स करे हम. And Fiscal Responsibility Budget Management Act has a clause known as escape clause. What is that? कम कर सकते हो? And what have we done now? Unique identity in the form of Aadhaar, financial inclusion in the form of JAM Trinity, GST, IBC 2016, privatization, और इसको strategic disinvestment भी लिख सकते हैं इधर. Tax rate rationalization, administrative tax reforms, decriminalization of offences. This was according to Companies Act 2013. Vaccine rollout, expenditure management reforms, आत्मनिर्भर भारत, पब्लिक डिजिटल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर. डिजिटल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर में ऑलरेडी देखा हमने डिजिटल सिग्नेचर, डिजी लॉकर, UPI, ONDC. all of these are the reforms that India has done. So this is a question जहां पर you have to compare 1998 with the present time. Then growth returns. फिर growth वापस कब आया? And it is telling you one of shocks delayed the growth return. यानी जो शॉक्स मिल रहे थे आपको यहां पर बिकॉज ऑफ द .com bubble, US recession, 9/11 attacks, nuclear sanctions on India, these shocks delayed the growth. In the same way, once the shocks faded away, structural reforms paid higher growth after 2003. तो 2003 के बाद हमें हायर ग्रोथ मिलने लगा. इट इज नोन एज अ लैग्ड इफेक्ट. इसी को हम क्या कहते हैं? लैग्ड इफेक्ट. In the same way, right hand side पे balance sheet strengthened in the financial sector, corporate sector deleveraged by about 30 percentage points, emphasis on macroeconomic stability while dealing with global shocks. अब they are saying that, page turn कीजिए, page 39. They are saying that India is prepared to grow at its potential once the one-off shock recedes. ठीक है, सो फ्रॉम 2023 to 30 जैसे जैसे ये पैंडेमिक का और यूक्रेन क्राइसिस का और बैलेंस शीट प्रॉब्लम का मसला हल होगा तो इंडिया विल हैव अ हाई पोटेंशियल ग्रोथ. इज इट क्लियर? और राइट डाउन, रीड दिस लाइन इन बोल्ड. This is the primary reason for expecting India's growth outlook to be better than it was in the pre-pandemic year. यानी हम pre-pandemic year से बेहतर लेवल पर चले जाएंगे. क्लियर है? Go back to the first page. Read the second para. जोर से.
This situation is undertaken by the government had led growth returns due to temporary shocks in the economy. Once these stocks faded, the structural reforms paid growth dividends from 2003. Similarly, in the present decade, the presence of strong medium-term growth magnets gives us optimism and hope that once these global shocks of the pandemic and the spiking commodity prices in 2022 fade away, the Indian economy is well placed to grow faster in the coming decade.
बस बस समझ आ क्लियर है ना? This much is important here. This would complete your chapter. और इसमें कुछ important नहीं है. It was just this table that was the most important table. ठीक है, ये टेबल आप घर पे इसको अच्छे से you can go through it again. वैसे it's more than enough जो इसमें लिखा है. Let's go to the question जो हमने छोड़ा था. Which of the following reforms were undertaken as part of the 1991 reforms? Transition towards market exchange rate. Transition towards market exchange rate. Go to page number 25. Go to page number 25. Read the second paragraph जहां पर लिखा है Initiation of the Reforms 1991. Read this paragraph and give me the answer. Read the paragraph with the heading of Initiation of the Reforms 1991, page number 25. Online students, are you reading the chapter para 2, page number 25? Option है वहां से 1 and 4, 2 and 3, 1 and 2, 3 and 4. Which of the following reforms were undertaken as part of 1991 economic reforms? 1991 में क्या क्या किया था हमने? We had done two things: macroeconomic stabilization and structural adjustment reforms. So what was the difference? Macroeconomic stabilization में what did we do? We wanted to control the inflation, and we wanted to get down the fiscal deficit. We want to get down the government's debt. Government का कर्जा कम करना था. We wanted to control the current account deficit, lower twin deficits. And what was structural adjustment reform? Long-term reforms to change the basic structure of the economic policies. इसमें इंडस्ट्रियल रिफॉर्म्स, फाइनेंशियल सेक्टर रिफॉर्म्स, बैंकिंग रिफॉर्म्स, फिस्कल रिफॉर्म्स, एक्सटर्नल रिफॉर्म्स, सब कुछ करा. ठीक है. नाउ इन इकोनॉमिक रिफॉर्म्स आपको इसी पैराग्राफ से पता चलेगा. ट्रांजिशन टुवर्ड्स मार्केट डिटरमाइंड एक्सचेंज रेट, ये आपको मिलेगा इन लाइन नंबर 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 लाइन नंबर 10 पे जाइए आप, जहां पर 51% लिखा है. There they have mentioned the exchange rate was made flexible and allowed to depreciate as necessary to maintain competitiveness. When you allow when you allow it to depreciate, you're transitioning towards the market exchange. ठीक है ना? So first statement is correct. Second is removal of import licensing. Go to line number 5. Line number 5. 1991 जहां पर लिखा है import licensing on all intermediate inputs and capital goods was done away with, and the entry restrictions for firms were simplified. So removal of import licensing is correct. Then ending of public sector monopoly in all sectors. वहां पे all नहीं लिखा है, वहां पे क्या लिखा है? वहां पे many लिखा है. So because of all it becomes wrong, and capital account convertibility allow नहीं किया हमने. It is mentions that we allowed partial convertibility in capital account. Full convertibility नहीं था. So fourth statement is wrong. Answer is 1 and 2. ठीक है? कैपिटल अकाउंट और करंट अकाउंट में क्या फर्क है?
करंट में क्रेडिट सर्विस रहते हैं, उसमें आते हैं लोन्स, इन्वेस्टमेंट.
चलो ठीक है, लेट्स कंक्लूड. Alright guys, thank you so much. This was your chapter number 2. इसमें just focus on the things wherein the reforms have been mentioned of 1991 and how these reforms created a lagged effect and gave us the benefit after 2003, and how is the period of 1998 to 2002 analogous with the period of 2020 onwards, the COVID time, and what shocks were there in 1998 and how were the shocks related to the current shocks that we have. Like we had the shocks of balance of payment crisis back then in 1991. उसके बाद से फिर हमने उसमें रिफॉर्म्स करे, तो रिफॉर्म्स का जो फ्रूट हमें मिला वो काफ़ी साल के बाद मिला. सो वो सारा टेबल इंपॉर्टेंट है. देन what were the new age reforms? What are the 4 pillars of these new age reforms that we covered? So this was it. Thank you so much. God bless.